You can go on, yes. So I'd like to know if you've been to training before. And if you could do your virtual hand raise, that would be great. So we can get a feel for how many of you have actually gone to training before. So far, I see 3 participants have raised their hands. Oh, now we're up to 5, 7, 8. Oh, here we go.
I show 11 so far, 12. Stopped at 12.
Well, we know we have about a third of you who have been to training before and about 2/3 who haven't. Now, if you'll lower your hand, which is fairly easy to do, I think, I'm going to ask you another question. Great. If you'll go on to the next slide, Greg. Now, I'd like to know how many of you know if your club has actually completed a district grant or not. This time, I'd like you to write your club name in the chat. Oh, look at all those hands go up. Hands up works too, because I can see your clubs there. If you don't want to do chat, just raise your hand. That's simpler. All right. Lots and lots of chat answers and lots of hands. It looks like we have more clubs that you represent who have done district grants than the people who have actually been to district grant training. So we are all so excited that we have new people here representing clubs that are already familiar with the process, as well as new people with clubs who perhaps haven't done a district grant recently. If you'll go on, Greg. Okay, we have 5 goals for tonight. When you leave, we'd like for you to understand the basics. And I'm talking the very basics and the timeline of the process. We want you to understand what it takes to successfully manage your district grant. And we want you to understand the stewardship expectations we have, because when the Rotary Foundation gives us money and we in turn pass those funds along to you, they expect that we will manage them wisely. Then if you'll move on, Greg. We want you to be able to complete the memorandum of understanding. And also, we want to qualify clubs who have members attending so that you can receive those grant funds and participate in Rotary Foundation programs. So 5 goals that we hope to cover tonight. Greg. So I'm going to do the overview, which is kind of a big picture look at the whole process. Then David Carroll, who's our district grants chair, and Linda Schultz, who's in charge of our club qualification piece. She looks at all the paperwork that you send in and makes sure that everything's complete. We'll be talking to you about club qualifications. David will be telling you some things to remember about creating a project. And then Pat White, who is our coordinator for district grants, we'll be talking to you about how to actually go about applying and filling out that application form. And we'll pull up the form so that you can look at it as she talks about it. Then together, Pat and David will talk to you about actually implementing the project, filling out progress reports, closing it out, all the things you'll need to do. Greg. Okay, like I said, I'm going to do the overview. You can go on, Greg. So the very first thing, oops, too far. The very first thing that your president-elect, your president next year, because remember, we're talking about grants for next year, the 23-24 Rotary. So your president-elect and the rest of your club need to identify that project now. And then the second step is to become qualified. You're taking the first of those 2 parts to become qualified tonight by making sure that you have people in attendance either at the seminar we had in October that was live, or at this training, or the one that will be on November 28th, which will be Jim Roxlow's Global Grant Training. And you can qualify by attending either one. So if you have club members who want to do Global Grants Training, have them join Jim on the 28th. The next thing you'll have to do after that, after you've identified your project and you're thinking about that and you've qualified, you're going to have to submit some paperwork. One piece of that is actually one document, but it has two parts. And the first part is the club memorandum of understanding, which basically says that you acknowledge what you need to do. And then your club qualification plan that shows how you're going to do it. You can go ahead and turn that in immediately, or you can wait and submit it when you turn in your district grant application. Greg? So we started accepting applications the day of the live training, which was October 8th. And we will take those applications through January the 31st of this Rotary year, 2023, January 31. In years that not everyone asked for all the funds, we've been able to accept applications after January 31. But I can tell you that those years have been scarce lately. So I would strongly advise you to try to get your project in by January 31. And starting on the very next day, February 1st, our district grant review team will review your applications and look at your qualification plan and your memorandum of understanding and make sure everything's okay. And we'll start approving. One thing I do want you to understand, especially if you haven't done district grants before, is that our team is here to help you. We are not here to punish you. We're not going to turn you down if you get something wrong the first time. What we're going to do is reach out and say, oh, you forgot this part, or, oh, we need to know about this, and I don't think you quite understood the question. So we are all here to help. I promise you that we will help you submit a successful application. All you have to do is ask. So after we go through that whole review process, what happens is we bundle all those applications together and fill out a big, long online form for the Rotary Foundation, and we submit the whole package to the foundation for approval. Our target date for that is May of 2023. Usually, once we submit it, we can get an approval back in a couple of weeks. And once they approve those bundled district grants, we will notify you when you can begin your project. And as Pat will emphasize later, do not start before you get that notification. And at the same time, you'll get an actual grant number to use. And the target date for us letting you know that is June of 23. Greg? I hear somebody taking pictures. I love it. This will also be up on the website. So you don't have to be frantically taking notes. I promise you it'll be up. But I take pictures too. So the next step, then you'll be notified and you'll carry out your project. We do ask that you do a progress report. And normally clubs start as soon as they get notified. So while October doesn't sound like the middle of the Rotary year, it's really important that we get that progress report by October 1st, because we're already thinking ahead to, okay, if your project isn't going to make, or another project isn't going to make, or you might not be going to use all the money that you asked for, then that allows us to reallocate that to other projects, perhaps to a club who came up with a project after the initial deadline, or a club who asked for more money than we could give them. So we use those progress reports to help us gauge what else we might be able to fund and to see if we can help you in any way as well. The final report we ask for by May the 31st of 2024. Now that's the final report. That means you've closed it out, you've paid all your bills, you've got receipts for your expenditures, and at that point, we'll reimburse you for the funds that we've approved. Now, you got to remember here, and we'll talk about this later again, that you have to be able as a club to pay for the entire project because these grants are reimbursement grants. So let's say you ask for, you're going to put $3,000 into a project, we approve it, and we say that from the district and the Rotary Foundation, you'll get $3,000 in matching funds. So you've got a $6,000 project. You have to be able to show us the bills and the receipts for the whole $6,000. And at that point, once we approve your final report, we will send you a check. And that can happen very quickly. But just remember, you need to have the funds available to spend before you get reimbursed. Greg? So some things that we want to remember. As if you go to the Global Grants training in 2 weeks, you'll hear about how with Global Grants, you have to do a project in one of the 7 areas of focus. And we'll look at those in just a minute. But district grants aren't quite as rule-oriented, I guess. They do have to be humanitarian. They have to do something good for people. They can be local, and most of our clubs do local projects with district grants, but you can also use district grants to do something international. If you have a traveler in your club who wants to do something with water wells and you're just getting started, a district grant might be a great way to start, and then maybe think ahead to doing a global grant later because you get more matching funds with global grants. So that was a little commercial for global grants, and it may cause you to decide to tune in on the 28th. So the district grants are funded by donations that are made to the annual fund 3 years before. And so that means that for next year, the donations that came in during the 2021 Rotary year will be used to fund the grants. And I'm going to show you how that works in just a second. Greg? Just in case you'd like to know, these are Rotary's areas of focus. And generally, our district grants will fall in these areas. We have disease prevention and treatment, water, sanitation and hygiene, maternal and child health, basic education and literacy, community and economic development, the environment. And I think I started with peace building and conflict resolution, but just in case, I'll say that again. So those are Rotary's 7 areas of focus. As you think about possible projects, one of the ways that I try to think about this is, let's say that you're doing a food backpack project for an area school, and that's really important. We all know that. We don't want our children to be hungry. That is a perfect thing to do for a district grant. A global grant, it wouldn't work for. And again, just to show you the difference, with a global grant, they have to be sustainable. And you have to work on making people able to feed themselves. So it might be more something like, well, let's figure out how to improve farming in the area. Let's improve the economics so that people have more money to buy food. So district grants can be more short-term, whereas global grants tend to be more sustainable and long-term with very defined outcomes. Okay, Greg. Now we're going to talk about that funding I was telling you about. So 3 years before, the annual fund donations fund district and global grants. The foundation takes out, it used to be they didn't take out any money, but then the stock market fluctuations started getting really bad, and they made a decision to use 5% for operating costs. I can tell you that compared to all other charities, that is a minuscule amount for operations. And in fact, the reason why the charitable organizations that rate charities rate us sometimes number 1 in the whole country, and definitely in the top 1% because of the way we manage our money. So 47.5% is district controlled and 47.5% is trustees controlled. The foundation is run by a group of people called trustees that we elect. Well, we elect the directors, and it's a big, anyway, it's all Rotarians who have our best interests at heart in terms of doing good in the world. So in the 47.5% that's district controlled, we can put part of that money into our district debt. Well, it goes into our district designated fund. Part of it goes to district grants. According to the rules of the foundation, the maximum amount of that we can put into district grants is 50%. And we have put 50% in as long as we've been doing these because we know how important they are to our clubs. The other place that we put our money, the other area is global grants. And global grants, as we talked about, are a little bit different, but still allow you to do great things in the world. So that's a general overview, but now let's look at what happened for the upcoming year. Greg? So our annual fund donations in 2021 were over $500,000. And of that $500,000, we got $252,519 back that we could then spend on district grants and global grants. So you'll see that next year we have approximately $126,000 that we can put into district grants and another $126,000 that we can put into global grants. We can also use it for polio eradication efforts, for the things like the Ukraine and the floods that happened in West Tennessee and in Kentucky, and the terrible fires in Gatlinburg years ago. The disaster relief grants can also be funded from that global grant match. And if we have Peace Fellows or Global Scholars, that comes out of that area as well. Greg? So the whole idea of this is grant management. So again, we want to be sure that there are financial controls in place that make sure the money is safe, that the things that we do are humanitarian and educational, and that we actually meet the needs of the people we're doing it for. Sometimes with all the best intentions, we might think that we know what a community needs and try to do something. And in fact, it may not be what they would ask for if we asked them. So be sure that you ask the people who will benefit what it is that they need. And you can do that through a community assessment. And we'll be talking more about that a bit later. And again, that we safeguard those donor funds because we want to keep that #1 rating. We want our Rotarians and people outside Rotary to trust our foundation. So that leads us to the stewardship piece, that responsible management. So Rotarians have to supervise the district grants. You have to be involved in that. You can't just give money to somebody and say, here, go do this with a grant. It doesn't work that well. So there are standard business practices that you all use in your businesses for managing money, and we like to see the same thing happen with grants. And if there's an irregularity, it's okay. You need to tell us and then we'll report it. And 99 times out of 100, it's just a notation. And that you do what you say you'll do. If you realize that you're going to have to make a change, please reach out to us and we'll help you revise your grant application. It doesn't mean you'll lose the money. It just means that something came up and it has to be changed. But we need to get it in writing. And that you review the records, make sure they match, and that you turn your reports in a timely fashion when we need them. One of the reasons that we really want you to be careful about that final report is when we finally close out all the grants and turn that into the Rotary Foundation, that is when they release the money for the next year. So we can't get any funds until we get all those final reports in, tabulate them, put them into the online system and submit to Rotary. And when clubs are late, that holds up the new funds for all clubs. So we hope that you will try very hard to meet the deadlines for everyone. We have people asking, well, why do we have to qualify every year? Well, that is a requirement of the Rotary Foundation. And part of that is that you have new president-elects every year as they're thinking about the projects. We want this involved. We also, as you think about changes that might have occurred with the foundation or with the program, it's important to understand any changes that come up. And it's always good to have a refresher course. The club itself is responsible for the use of the funds. So if your treasurer absconds, it's going to turn out to be the club's responsibility. If you have potential conflicts of interest, please disclose them. That might be things like you have someone in your club who is on the board of an organization that you were working with for a district grant. Let's say it's Habitat for Humanity, and you happen to have a Rotarian in your club who's on the board of directors. That's not going to stop you from getting the grant, but you do need to put it down in writing on paper so that people know, because it could be a potential conflict of interest, but we know that you'll watch out and make sure that doesn't happen. Every once in a while, the Rotary Foundation says, okay, it's time for a random audit. And it might be that when they come in, they might pick your club. And so it's important that you keep your financial records and everything. And we will keep them too, but we need you to help us comply with that requirement. And of course, you have to use them the right way. Greg.
Okay, Debbie, you ready for me on qualification?
I am indeed.
Thank you. And some of this will be a little repetitive, and we'll go into use some examples of what Debbie has already talked about. So, Greg, I'm going to kind of go over some basics, and then Linda Schultz is actually going to be going over the form. You know, the qualification process, if you've been to grants training before, is something that we haven't spent a lot of time on as far as the paperwork with the MOU and the financial plan for the club. And I think this has been really good to show the forms and kind of go over that. And that's what Linda's going to do here in just a few minutes. But, you know, when we're focusing on and I'm glad that we are focusing more on the qualification process. So when we're asking clubs to qualify, our district has to also be qualified. So we qualify as a district so we can do grants training and to qualify the clubs. So our district has been qualified, and the attendance here tonight is the first thing that you can do to be part of the process. So we ask for every club to at least have two members to attend training. And you know what we're trying to do is we're trying to build up a pool of members that are part of all the clubs so that we can have a source of people just circulating. Sometimes the same people come, that's okay, but we are trying to get more people involved. And that's just part of what this process. So every club signs the agreement with the club with the club memorandum of understanding, and they're going to be agreeing that they're going to spend the Rotary Foundation money wisely. And that's what we do. This form is the same form that's used throughout the Rotary world. We all use the MOU. And that's what the Rotary Foundation requires us to do, to agree to be involved in the grants program. So once you understand the agreement, you submit the club MOU and the qualification plan. The qualification plan is something that our district puts on there that kind of gives you a little bit of guidance on who's going to be responsible for the checking account, and you want to disclose any conflicts of interest. Greg? And also, we on that form, and Linda will show you that both the current president and the president-elect both will be signing that document since we have the split years. So the club qualification, it's required annually. And how do you get started? You want to review last year's qualification plan. Do you know where last year's qualification plan is? And did you understand what you wrote in the last form? Did you do what you wrote? Did you follow every thing that you agreed to? And was it good enough? Linda will go over the form and you can see what we're talking about. So you review the form, you modify and resubmit it, make sure you update it with new people involved in it, who's going to be responsible. You sign the new memorandum of understanding, and then you'll submit that to Linda Schultz. Greg? Maintaining qualification. So to maintain your qualification, you follow the terms of the MOU. You fully implement the stewardship and the grant management practices to prevent any of the misuses of funds. Since we're doing reimbursements, we don't see a lot of misuses because we're asking for, we really do a great job with to really making sure all the funds are being used correctly. But make sure that your club is using the funds correctly. And if there's any issues, then you can contact us and let us know. But that's not a big problem in our district. You want to appoint a club member or a committee to manage the qualification plan. And think about who that could be in your club. I think of in my club, it's someone that's stable. It's maybe someone that is used to using, that keeps good records, that you see at the club meetings every week, maybe your club treasurer, your club secretary. So think about someone that's going to be there and appoint that person and let that person in committee help you to manage that qualification plan. We all move around and we want to make sure that person is stable with the club. So the club qualification plan. What the MOU requirements does, what MOU requirements does your club already implement? You have a good place to keep your records? Do you review to see if you have conflicts of interest? These are some of the things you need to think about. Who signed your checks? Do you use one signature or two? These are some things to think about. What requirements does your club need to implement? Is there something you could do better? Could you keep better records? And we're going to ask you talking a little bit more about records as we go, and good receipts and all these things that are involved. We've already talked about what type of members would be good choices to help implement the MOU. Okay, Greg? Let's talk about some best practices. We talked about who a good manager would be. We wanted to talk about conflicts of interest. Debbie touched on that a few minutes ago. But conflicts of interest, we all are involved in so many things. We really are, and our club members serve on boards. Just be careful not to have a real direct conflict of interest. If you see a potential conflict of interest on the MOU, you can disclose that. And that's what you do. You disclose it. Then that way there's no conflict. And that person, as long as that person's not involved in the financial part of it, handling money, I think it'll be just fine. Training. You want to make sure and train the information that you have, that you're gaining here tonight. You want to make sure that the people involved in the grant and the grant process know what the rules are and what the Rotary Foundation is requiring. We have a lot of questions about bank accounts, and we'll go into detail a little bit about that. But the bank account, mainly what the Rotary Foundation is interested in with global grants, you have to have a separate bank account. With district grants, because we're doing reimbursements, I think it's a lot of clubs probably have great examples of how they handle that. But one example, I remember some clubs do have a district grant account that they actually operate all their district grants out of. The whole goal is not to commingle your funds with operating funds of your club, and that's the goal. If you have a great treasurer like we have in our club, then you can work under a line item, just making sure that those funds are kept separate. Financial management plan. I think that what you're agreeing to really is, how do you operate? I think about this and very simple. How do you operate your own funds? I find that I manage other people's funds, I think sometimes even a little bit more strict than I do my own. I think about my own checking account, and I'll use this as an example. Sometimes if I'm within a few dollars, I don't think too much about it on my personal account. But when I was managing the district foundation account, every single penny, and when you're working on these projects, you want every single penny to be accounted for. And I think that's just good basic business and accounting principles. Document retention. This is something important. The Rotary Foundation, you will be agreeing to this in your MOU, that the document retention is 5 years. So we keep, as a district, we keep the records. I keep a hard copy, and the coordinators usually keep an electronic copy. And then we want to make sure that we turn in a copy to the district. So Jennifer Campbell keeps a copy. And also these documents are audited, not by an outside auditor, but an internal audit with our district finance committee. They go through and make sure that we're doing what we're supposed to. So that's the reason why when we ask you to verify certain documents, that it's not because we're giving you a hard time, because we want to make sure that we're good stewards of the foundation, of the money that we give. Reports, keep good receipts. You're agreeing to this in your MOU. You want to keep good receipts, legible receipts in case you're ever asked for it. And that's the reason why you have to have a stable person to manage some of your grants. And approval, all this is, you get approved, MOU, get it approved, and then you are ready to, you're agreeing to all these things, these requirements from the Rotary Foundation, and then you are ready to start your grant once you get your MOU and your financial plan approved. And we make sure that you know what you're doing as far as you're agreeing to it. So Linda, you're on, Linda Schultz. And I want to tell you, Linda Schultz has done a wonderful job. And I want to tell her how much we appreciate her work. She's keeping us on board with qualifications and memorandum of understanding. So Linda, let's go over some of the documents.
Linda, are you going to share? Or would you like me to do it? I can do it.
Linda's muted.
Unmuting it here.
There's Linda. We can hear her voice now. Thank you, Linda.
Well, I'm glad you all can hear my voice this week, because last week I had COVID and it was no fun. But I'm okay now, thank goodness. This form that we've been talking about, the club qualification and the MOU, it's a 6-page document. And the first 3 pages really tell you what you need to do and how you need to approach things. You will refer to that page a lot when you're filling out the last of the pages 4 through 6. But before you may want to even have your foundation chair be the lead person. Like we said in the past, it doesn't necessarily have to be the president or the president-elect, but it does need to be somebody that is a stable member, because they're going to be living with this for a while. You're going to need to be able to answer a lot of questions. You're going to be able to have to look in DAC-DB and see if some of these things have been handled. There's just things that this will just walk you through each step. That's the nice thing about this form. It really does help you. Also, if you have a grant, make sure that every club member knows about it. I've called a president before, and she said, well, we don't have a grant. And I said, well, yes, you do. And they had what's called a multi-club grant, where several clubs went together. So make sure that everybody in the club knows what's going on, because as Rotarians, we need to toot our horn a little bit and let people know what we're doing, because we're out there, trying to help the communities and help other people. So just keep that in mind as you go through it. this person that you appoint to be the lead person on this, he will be making a lot of, he'll be responsible for turning the paperwork in on time, and Pat will go over a lot of the things that you will need to do on your reports and things like that. Excuse me. The financial plan, it tells you what you need to do. And it doesn't have to be some long, elaborate thing. You know, this is not some big corporation that you're dealing with here, but you know, you need to set up some accounts that you know you're going to be using, and have that person to help you with it. Maintain segregation of duties and handling funds. One of the things that we did, our club did, when we had a multi-club grant, we appointed a treasurer from our club, not the treasurer that we used for everything else, but we appointed a grant treasurer. And because we would be getting funds in from other clubs, and we wanted to make sure that everything was kept segregated and there was no problems with it. We kept that account on after we closed that grant out. And so, you know, it's just our district grant bank account. But as been said before, global grants do require a bank account, but district grants do not. So no problem there. Keep going there, Greg. Your document retention, David covered that we have to keep 5 years. And, you know, we know that we keep things on computers, but we also know that computers can crash on us and we can lose our data. So make sure that you have, you know, you use a flash drive or something like that to keep things on it. Make sure that, you know, the people in the club that need these records, that they have a copy of them, because you may not be around when they need those records. So just remember that we've got to keep them for 5 years. Here, I have my notes here. Go out and report a misuse of grant funds, Greg. Okay. If there's any kind of a potential or real misuse of management funds, and David and Debbie have already alluded a lot to this, the district needs to know that. So be sure and let the district committee know about that, and they can help you to work things out and help you with it. One thing that happens is, we'll go to this. Here's the things that you're going to need to know about how much annual giving you gave in the prior years, how much your annual giving is going to be this year. So these are forms that are information that you need. Also then on the authorization agreement down below, Greg, keep going, go on down. Okay. You do not have to sign this, since we're going to, this is a Word form and it expands as you use it. So it's really, please don't ever submit one in writing. We have, that would be hard to read. So, and there's really not enough space really to try to write everything out longhand. But this is where all this information, your club presidents would also sign it. Go on now, Greg. Okay, and there's where you send the information to. Go on to the next form. Our club qualification form. This is where you're going to be writing a lot of information. This is where you're going to be explaining what your club needs and explain how you're going to do these things. The club has the leadership responsibilities for qualification. And really these forms, I think, are really self-explanatory, but you just need to really read them and make sure that you understand what the question is asking, because we can misinterpret a question if we're, you know, lots of times I can, you know, instead of the word not, you know, I might think it said, you know, to do something. And so you just need to read it and find out how to go about it. The potential conflicts of interest. and describe how your club will handle it. Lots of times what happens is people put NA. Well, potential does not mean right now. Potential is something in the future. So just try to read the question. And here again, if you don't understand it, I'm sure that all of us would much prefer that you call and ask us as to have to send you emails and try to get you to redo the forms and have to resubmit them. And then you will have to need to know who attended these meetings, your two people that came and the date they attended. Then you will need to know about your financial management, and go on up on that a little bit there, Greg. Here again, we've talked about global grants, that they do require a lot more than a district grant does. But you just need to, our club grants, list, or if you have a bank account, you list them below. But here again, it's not necessary with the district grant. And make sure, though, that the financial management, that it complies with it, the MOU. And I'll just give you a few things that I've got here where people have answered some of these questions, that sometimes we think that things have to really be, really elaborate and long and things like that. And I think you'll find that you really don't have to do that. On this one, I'm looking at it, it asks, please describe how the club does or will do this. And it says all bank statements and related documents to the grant will be kept by the grant treasurer, and backup will be given to the lead club primary contact. And so, it doesn't have to be real elaborate. Just try to make sure that you try to answer it. And then go on down a little bit there, Greg. Okay, have accounts and records been established? You just need to, check yes if you have. And records retention. So these are things that really, as you go along, it'll be very easy to fill these forms out. It's not anything that's really difficult. It's just a matter of trying to read them and, make sure that you understand what's going on. Who will submit the reports to the district grants. And here again, that would be your lead person. This is why that we ask you to, because they're going to be involved in every step of this. And then let's see, authorization agreement, the president, the club president, and the club president-elect, because you're going to have 2 years involved there. They will need to sign off on that. And here again, they don't have to physically sign it, since if you submit it electronically, and that's the way that we certainly prefer it. And this is basically what I have. I hope that if anybody have any questions you want to ask me, I'll be happy to go over it with anyone, answer anything. I think that's it then.
Linda, you must have done a great job, because I didn't see any questions.
Well, they just didn't know how to raise their hand, I'd say.
Well, don't worry. There'll be some time for questions. If you think of something, jot it down.
Are we going to get a copy of that slide? I do have a question.
Go right ahead.
Which slide's that?
Well, everything that you just went through, are we going to get copies of all of that?
It's on the website.
Tell them where those forms are, Linda.
They're under, been so long since I've looked them up, David. I'm sorry.
Well, you get on the district website, right, and District 6780, and then you'll look in Foundation and you'll see where the forms are, and you'll pull that down. It says applying for a district grant. And all the forms that all the forms that we talk about tonight will be on that on the district website, and you can actually download them and fill them out and submit them. So they all
thank you.
Thank you.
The forms are under the grants tab.
Go ahead, Becky.
Go ahead.
The forms are under the grants tab on the district.
Thank you. Clarifying that. Yeah. So you go you'll see the grants tab, and you'll pull it. It says applying for a district grant. And then there's the global grant forms are on there too.
And then I have one thing to
Sure,
warn
Becky.
people about. I don't know if it's the right place, but I thought of it right now. And as old as I
Okay.
am, I won't remember 30 seconds from now. When you turn in your receipts, some people get the cart before the horse and they start buying things before the grant's been approved.
Right.
Your club just paid for it because you will not get matching funds for that.
Right. And I'll go ahead, Becky. I'm sorry.
You cannot turn any expense receipts in dated prior than the date of approval on your grant.
Gotcha.
Exactly right. And that's a Rotary Foundation rule. Until they approve all of our grants and you get a letter giving you a number, they will not reimburse those. If they were to audit those, they would not let us use funds that were spent prior to the grant being approved. Any other questions?
David, I just put in the chat, yes.
Go ahead, Debbie.
PowerPoint will be on the district. The PowerPoint will be on the district website, and we will also upload the recording from tonight. Greg, do you want to tell them where you're going to put that stuff?
I don't know where I'm going to put it. It should be under the grants. It'll be under the grants tab. So once I get it, I'll put it up there. It'll be, when you go to the grants tab, it'll be there. You'll see it.
Okay. And for district grants, just to sum up the qualification process, when we submit all those, that we have to, Debbie or the foundation chair for the district and the district governor have to sign off that all the clubs have been trained and qualified, and we ask especially on a multi club grant that all of the clubs participating, and Pat will go over that with you, will be qualified. Okay, Debbie, are we ready to start with creating a project? Okay.
We are indeed. Go for it.
Thank you. I'll move right along. Okay, the objectives. Greg, yeah, this is what we're going to try to identify in this part of the training. Identify the best practices for choosing a project, develop a plan to implement your project, and understand what is needed to establish a financial management plan. Greg? So these are just some things to think about what a successful grant project, and think about this because most of your clubs have already, these clubs have participated in grants, and think about this. It meets, and that we're thinking about both global and for district grants, but we're kind of focusing on district grants because Jim's going to hit some of the highlights in detail a little bit more in his presentation. But does it meet a real community need? Have you really asked your community and polled kind of your community to find out exactly what is needed in your area? Just because you think something is needed, that might not be the right community need. Does it meet the need of your community? Have frequent personal partner communication. Frequent. This is really important, especially with international projects, because you want to make sure that the person that is helping you or the organization is helping you in the other country, or if you're working with a nonprofit, you want to make sure that they understand your timeline, the requirements that the Rotary Foundation is asking us to do. And we want to make sure that they understand that they have to get receipts. They have an obligation to go along with what our projects and what our requirements are. Have an implementation plan with measurable goals and outcomes. Some of the things that I think about are I think about examples for projects that we've done in the past. You know, a lot of times your club will get involved in a very large project, but you know, when you submit a grant, you can only get a small part of that. There's only a small part of that project that we can give you a grant for, because I'm going to use the example in Chattanooga. The Chattanooga Club did the Miracle Field. over $1 million project. But when they submitted their district grant for that, you know, there's no way we could get involved in that. We don't have that much funds. But we were able to do a small part of that. Like they got a grant for the surface for the field. And then the next year, they got another grant, and we helped and participated in that as a district with a grant for the handicap accessible playground equipment. So find something, a piece of that puzzle, that's what comes to my mind, that has an outcome that we can have a beginning and an end to. Even though some of these projects are multi-year projects that your clubs are working on, but let us find a piece of the project that we can work on. Are these projects suitable, sustainable beyond the life of the grant? So when you finish this project, if you're doing I don't know, landscaping, you're doing some landscaping work, or if you're putting in a well and participating with a well in another country, when you do this project, because this is like I said, this project has a beginning and an end. So when you finish this project, is it sustainable? Who's going to take care of it after you finish the project? After you submit your final report, do you have a plan on who's going to take care of it and make these sustainable projects? Practice proper stewardship with the grant funds. We've talked a lot about that tonight. And that's exactly what we need to do, is make sure that we take good care of the money that we've donated. So community assessments, you're gonna really hear a lot about community assessments in the global grants, global grants seminar that Jim does, because that's a requirement with the Rotary Foundation to get a global grant. But and it's an online form, and it's a little bit more lengthy and has a lot of details. You have to meet certain requirements. But when I'm thinking about some things the way that we can talk about the community assessment with district grants. So if you decide that you are going to do a global grant and you need to send a team of people over, or you need to get involved with the assessment, the community assessment, in certain circumstances, and if it meets the requirements, then you can send a team over with a district grant to help with your community assessment. So that's an example on how that you can get involved with a district grant. But you want to assess your club's resources and availability and its potential partners to meet the need. So think about, does your club have the right resources to be able, and the right partners to meet the need of the project that you're working on? And that's a question you'll have to answer for a global grant qualification. Choose a project that is based on what the community needs and what you want to do. A lot of times we think that our community needs something, but they might not really need it. And I know we've had some examples. We look at projects all the time. Our club, the Rotary Club of Cleveland, I'll use the example. We have a couple of people in our club online, and our president found a great project that was at the International Convention, and it's supplying shoes for needy kids in schools. So the first thing is there the first thing that we need to find out is, are the clubs wanting to, are the schools needing this project? Would it be something that they would help participate with us on? And that was a yes. And so we're trying to work on a project with our local schools. So find out what the need is and choose a project that's based on what the community needs and not what we come up with. And you might have some other examples that you might want to give us a little later. Partners. The Rotary Foundation and all of us have a lot of partners that we can work with. Some of the things how can your partner help make your project more successful? I think about a couple of examples. One example is we had a club, in the Lenore City Club, and they were wanting to put a water well in South Sudan. So they decided to team up with an organization instead of recreating the wheel, Waters of South Sudan. And they partnered with that. They're a great partner of Rotary. You might have some other organizations that will give you the expertise, and that's Rotary Foundation works with these groups all the time. The Children Nutrition Fund, Chattanooga Breakfast Club works with them in Haiti. Engineers Without Borders. A lot of times you can get an organization like this to help you in the other countries that you're working with. And I know a lot of clubs are working with them. Habitat is already got an organization put together that you can work with. So think about the partners that might help you with your project, make your project more successful. Think of another Rotary club that's in your area that you could team up with. Maybe think about all the organizations that are in your area and you could team up with them. How do you go about identifying potential partners? I think anytime that you want to identify a partner, you want to make sure that that they have a good reputation. Have they done what they said they would do when they've been involved in other projects? Do they use the funds wisely? So other Rotary clubs in your community are great resources. And other nonprofits and NGOs and government organizations. A lot of times clubs partner with the school system. They have a great, especially with different kind of reading projects and literacy projects. So think about and make sure that these nonprofits do a little research and make sure that they have good reputations. And most of the time, a lot of them have been approved by the Rotary Foundation, and you'll find out a little bit more about that if you call the Rotary Foundation and ask them. Okay, next slide. Project planning. The Rotary Foundation gives us some ideas. They say that you could form a 3-person grant committee. Clubs do it different ways, but I think that's a good idea. And you assign them roles. Try to put people that have different vocations on your committee. Maybe somebody that is good with finance, somebody that can be the person that goes to the project and reviews it, has the time to go and visit that project and report back. Someone that's going to do publicity. That's a big thing that we really don't look at sometimes, but who's going to publicize and help promote Rotary in your community? So everybody should have a little bit different role, and try to think about some diversity there. Set measurable and sustainable goals. When I think of measurable and sustainable goals, something that has a beginning and an end. So you don't want to do something that's so large that you cannot sustain and meet that goal, but you want to think about something very reasonable where you can do this when this 12-month grant or whatever the months are, that you want to make sure that you can start it and end it and meet those goals. Creating a budget. Pat will talk a little bit more about this when she's going over the forms, but try to put together a realistic budget, a budget that can be, that you're spent some time on it instead of just throwing a figure out. If you're going to buy books for a library, come up and get some bids on them, find out how much they cost, and then put a realistic budget together. Create an implementation plan. Think about how you're going to start the project, how you're going to monitor the project, how you're going to work through the project and make it sustainable. And you want to have a contingency plan. This is something that's very important with global grants. What's going to happen if you overspend? You know, right now prices are just going crazy on so many things. You could get a bid 1 month and 3 months from now that something has gone up. So you want to make sure that you have a contingency plan if things are going to go over. A lot of times what I think about another idea, it kind of fits in with this, but especially on these district grants, you get involved sometimes in a project and you find people that will step up and they will cover some of the things you were going to plan for in the project. But I would say if you do that, contact us, and if there's something else that pertains to that project that we can involve in that grant that you have, I think that's a good idea to think about it. But a contingency plan is what's going to happen if something happens, an uncertainty happens, how can you deal with it? And one thing you need to make sure is to let us know if there's any problems as you go along with your grant, and we'll be glad to help you with that. Okay, Greg. Creating a budget. You want to think about, like I mentioned, is it realistic? Have you got competitive bids? The big question that we have people ask us all the time is, can a Rotarian participate in, sometimes Rotarians own businesses that can contribute to the projects. There's nothing wrong with that, but I think it's good business principles to get some bids from 2 or 3 people just to show that whoever the Rotarian is, or a family member or whatever, that's the most reasonable and competitive bid. And that goes along with reasonable prices. You want to make sure that you've shopped around and you're using the money wisely, just like you would in your own business if you were going to go out and purchase something. You want to disclose potential or real conflicts of interest. And we talked a little bit about that in some of the paperwork with the MOU. But we all have some conflicts of interest that pop up. And one thing that I think about that we really need to be careful about, and we try to double check this when we are looking at the applications. Sometimes someone will sign the application, a Rotarian, and they are the head of the organization that they're doing the project in. We want to make sure that we don't do that. That person does not need to be signing any of the documents. And so, especially when it comes to budget items and spending money, they need to really show us if they're involved in this. You've got Rotarians involved in the organization that you're working with. They need to disclose on how they're going to have an arm's length relationship especially with the finances. And more than likely, there's not going to be a problem, but you don't want to have that criticism show up with your club. Okay, any questions? I think that's the next slide is questions. Any questions? Before Pat starts going over the reports and the application. Any questions with creating a project? Okay, Debbie, are we ready to move on with Pat?
We are indeed.
Okay, thank you, Greg. So the next one, so this is applying for a district grant. Okay, I'll start out right here just for a few slides. The learning objectives: being able to write a successful grant proposal and application, and you want to understand the good stewardship practices. We've all gone over that, but we'll go over the applications. The district grant forms. The forms can be found on the district website, just like we've been talking about. And we have, we'll go over the instructions and the timeline. We've done that. And we'll go over this here in just a minute with Pat. But we do have a single club application and a multi-club if clubs want to get together. And the district grant checklist is on the website. And basically that's what you can kind of check off and make sure that you've met all your requirements. Okay. Next slide. Okay, I think this is where you're going to start in, Pat. And I'm sorry if I've stolen some of your thunder, but go right ahead.
Yeah, okay. It's good to see everyone. A lot of names are familiar. It's nice to be able to put a face with the names. Okay, we're going to start off with the district grant application form for a single club. The sponsor is the Rotary Club that you're a member of, obviously. And the project funding is the amount that they're going to request from the district. And the club has to match that amount. You can have other funds, but your club has to match what you're requesting from the district. Okay, remember that the committee is not familiar with the project, so you need to describe it in detail. It doesn't have to have 6 pages of explanation, but just something that tells what is going to happen, what you're planning, what you hope to provide for a particular project. Let's go back up a little bit, Greg. Okay, the need for the project. As Debbie already mentioned, needs to be one of the areas. It does not need to be one of the areas, but most often it falls into one of the areas that they have on the form. And again, this form is one that you can fill in. You can type along. The project has to have goals and measurable objectives. And the location is the location of the actual project, not your club. You have to have a need for the project. And how many people will be affected? A lot of times you have to estimate that. Describe your target group for the project. And again, include the number of estimated people. If this project is like a project your club has completed in the past, explain how this project differs. You know, one of the things on the recommendations from the Rotary Foundation, actually it's in the terms and conditions that can be found on the RI website, is that you should not provide continuous or excessive support of any one beneficiary, entity, or community. So that's something to consider. You'd like to change up. Don't do the same thing every year. You need to describe in a step-by-step fashion how the project will be conducted. Who will do what? When are they going to do it? And then you also have to explain how they're going to do it. Project the outcomes. Describe how it will benefit the community and improve the lives of the people impacted by the project. And financial control. We've talked about that before. Make sure that you have someone that is capable of monitoring the funds. Usually it's your treasurer. That they do not have a personal relationship to the beneficiary or the cooperating organization. And as David mentioned, get competitive bids for the major items to show that they are reasonably priced. In many cases, your schools, if you are doing a project with the schools of books or some equipment or whatever, they can get a better price because they have established vendors. But again, try to get the best price that you possibly can. And then you need to describe how you can demonstrate that the funds are being properly spent. Have a committee for the project that doesn't include personnel related to the beneficiary of the organization. I just went over that, sorry. Sustainability. Will you install equipment that requires maintenance? Who's going to take care of it? Describe how the benefits of the project will be sustained. This may include maintenance by a Rotary Club or cooperating organization, or continued funding by a Rotary Club. Okay, the timeline, the project start date. As Debbie mentioned initially, you cannot start the date until after your application has been approved. But you have to put in a project start date, which according to the timeline that we have set out would be after June the 1st. Estimate the expenditure of funds date. When are you going to spend the money? Do not spend any money before you get approval, or it will not be reimbursed. And estimate the project completion date. Now, we have asked that everything be completed by March 31st of the following year after your application has been put in. And that's because we want to allow you time to get all of the receipts, the canceled checks, and make sure that everything is in order so that you can turn in a final report by May 31st, that we can send it in and that you can get your money. Okay, non-financial Rotary involvement. It's really very important to have your Rotarians in your club actively participate in the project. As David said previously, you don't want to just hand money over and not have any involvement at all. It goes against the very nature of what Rotary is all about. And publicity. How will ensure that the public knows that this is a project? Provide details on how you'll publicize it. And many times you have a project where you can put something, a small sign or some identification on whatever you're providing. For instance, several of the clubs did fencing for various needs. You could put a little sign on the fence that said that it was donated by Rotary or by your club. And the local newspapers, all kinds of media. It's good to tell the people what we're doing for the community. As it's been said many times, Rotary is what we do is one of the best kept secrets, and we don't want that to be. We want to get recognition for all the good that Rotary does around the world. Responsible Rotarians. Okay, this is very important. Please, please, please. When you pick a primary contact, have that person be the one that is actively involved so that they know what is going on. I can't tell you how many times over the last couple of years I try to make contact with the primary contact, and it turns out that they don't know what is going on. Sometimes they don't know they have a project. So make sure that that person is going to be the one that actually is dealing with it. Make sure all that information that they're asking for is provided, and also a secondary contact in case the primary may move, may become ill, not able to participate or whatever. Cooperating organizations. Many times people will just put in not applicable. Well, if you're working with another organization, that is a cooperating organization, whether it's a school, whether it's a nonprofit, whatever it might be. And all you need is just a simple letter. It doesn't have to be anything elaborate, but just the fact that they recognize that you are the primary source and that they are working with you on the project. Okay, now on the budget. It's best if you can break down into different categories what you're going to be providing. If it's equipment or supplies, you can make those subcategories in the amount and the amount of district funds that you plan to use, and the club funds, and maybe funds will be coming from other sources as well, but they all need to equal the amount that you have on the total budget. And that total budget item has to be the same as what is on the first page of what you're requesting. Okay, next. Reports and authorization. Again, as I said, we would like a target date of March 31st, and the final report must be submitted no later than May 31st. Any untimely submission may jeopardize you receiving your funds. And another thing I want to mention is if you do get your reports in early, and I'll talk about that later, you can get your funds as soon as the project is finished and approved. Okay, we have a checklist that is also on the district website. Make sure that you go over the questions on the website on the checklist. And the certification, please put in the name of your club on this certification. and then fill in whether who it is, the club president or the president-elect, and the signature, and date it. Many times it will come back without the signature or the date, and it just causes extra time and effort and delays getting your application approved. Okay, next. This just goes on to say where to send it. Send the completed form to David and to myself at the email addresses. If you have any questions about completing the form, call us, either David or myself. And I'd like to mention again that the reports are on the district website. They are not on DACDB. DACDB has nothing to do with the grant process. Okay. I'm not sure what is next here.
Pat, do you want to look at the multi-club form, or do you just want to mention that the questions are basically the same?
I'm sorry.
Do you want to look at the multi-club? Do you want to look at the multi-club form, or do you want to just mention the questions are basically the same?
We can go on to the multi-club. There's just a little bit of difference in the multi-club than the single club. Okay, if you put the multi-club up, please, Greg.
Debbie, you have that? I don't have it.
Here it
Yes,
is.
the multi-club, that's it. Mm-hmm. Okay, the lead sponsor, that's who's going to take responsibility for completing all of the reports, which club is heading the project. And then each club must be listed. And the project funding is also broken down by the various clubs that are involved. And here again, the total of the projects must match in section 9, that budget total. Okay, you can go on down. I think everything is the same as far as what we discussed on the single form. When it comes down to the primary contacts, you must have a contact for each club, and please complete that and keep your other clubs informed. If you're the lead project coordinator, make sure that your other clubs know what's going on. And that holds true too if you're doing a single club project. Make sure your own club knows what's going on. Okay, and then on the certification page, the lead club president-elect has to sign, and then also the assistant governor has to sign on a multi-club project. And again, make sure that they're signed and dated and submitted to David and myself. I just wanted to show the difference. There's not much difference, just in the
Pat, we had one question. Someone asked if they were involved in a multi-club project, could they also apply for a single club project? Yes. And yes, you can. Then someone else asked if a club could apply for 2 grants. And we don't have a problem. You can apply for 2 or 3, but we'll just have to see how the funding is. And if we run out of funds, we'll go back to you and say, you know, which projects are the most important to you. And then we can kind of work on that. So it says on the application, it shows the grant range is 500 to 5,000. Does anyone know the number of grants? You can apply for larger funds. That's a suggestion. But for example, this past year, we had 2 or 3 clubs that applied for over $20,000. Well, we were short of funds. And so we were not able to, we had to scale those larger projects back. And if we have any funds at the end of the Rotary year, then we'll look at those again. But we have to be careful. We want everybody to be able to participate in the grant program if we can. So I hope that answers your questions. If you had anything else, that's the two that I've seen. What about the closing report, Pat? Go ahead, Debbie.
Pat, would you like me to pull up the progress report and then the closing report?
Yes, please. You may as well go over those right now. Okay, it's very important. I should say, once we get approval from the district that the applications have all been approved, we will be assigning grant numbers. And once you get the grant number, your ID, then you can start on your project. But when you submit your progress reports or any communication, any email or anything, please use your club name or ID. I mean, there are times I might get 20 emails, and if I don't have an ID or a club, then I don't know who I'm dealing with. I have to hunt through all of them to see who I'm dealing with. So provide your district ID number, your Rotary Club, and the project title. And it just has to be a brief title. Again, you can do your project description. A lot of it you can just cut and paste from your original application. Describe what you've done so far. If you haven't done anything, please note that as well. We ask that you provide how many Rotarians have participated to date. And again, it's very important that the Rotarians in your club do participate. And they ask to give 2 examples of what they've done. You might just have a planning meeting, or you might have just gotten bids so far. But we'd like to know what's happening. And then it also asks for the status, what has to be complete, what has been completed, and then what has yet to be completed. And is it on schedule for everything to be done and turned in, cancel checks, bank statements by May 31st? And if not, describe what steps need to be taken to ensure that this will be accomplished. We've had a couple of projects that were delayed because of rain last year. Sometimes that happens, but again, if we don't get anything, we have to have everything in to the district in order to get our funds for next year, as Debbie said. Okay, and the financial impacts, just again, copying what you've put on your initial application, the original requested funds, the matching funds, and if you've spent anything to date. Many times you have not spent anything as of October 1st. But if you have, we just like for you to put it down. And then it's just showing if your project is less than what you anticipated, you will receive 50% of the actual project total, even if it's not as much as you originally requested. Okay, next.
I think one of the things we want to really stress there too is please do not send any receipts if you have spent money with the progress report. Save them all for the final report.
Thank you for it.
It's so much easier for us.
We don't need receipts until the final report. Okay, again, the signature, the name, club position, and the Rotary Club, and please include all that information. This can be electronic signature. Okay, and if you need any supplementary sheets, just attach them and send them to the progress reports to David and myself. Okay, and then the final report form.
All right, finally found it. Here we go.
There it is. Okay. Here again, put your identifying number in, the Rotary Club, the title, and here again, it's a cut and paste and just add to what you've already put in. It's interesting to see how many Rotarians do participate and what they've done, and then the impact that it's had on the community. How many non-Rotarians benefited from the project, and what do you expect the long-term benefits to be? If you're dealing with overseas, sometimes it's hard to estimate how many people, like their villages, you can only estimate how many thousand people it might benefit. And what was the role of the cooperating organization or agency? And here again, your district fund amount that was requested and your club matching funds. And these items again have to be the same as on the first page. My suggestion is that when you start your project, you start a spreadsheet, keeping track of your categories and the as you get expenditures, mark the amounts down, whether they were a charge or whether it was an ACH transfer, or whether it was a check, however it is, and just keep a separate spreadsheet and show that as you go along so that you don't have to do everything at the very end. Okay, and here again, if your project, even if your project is more than what was anticipated, unless you've gotten approval ahead of time, you will still get just 50% of what the original request was. And we are asking for an actual signature on the final report. It's just, it's not something that the foundation requires, but it's something that as a district that we like to have an actual signature to show that the one that is responsible for it has seen it and approved of what's being submitted. And I think that's about all on the actual forms.
Any other forms that we want to go over before we go back to the slides, finish up? Any questions about the forms?
You know, the timelines and the checklists are all on the district website under the grants tab. And there's just a wealth of information. If you go to the RI website, if you have any questions, it tells you what you can and cannot do. If you have any questions, just call us. The progress reports are due October 1st. And that's the only time that you have to do a progress report. And then of course your final report has to be submitted hopefully by April sometime. And how
Greg,
long?
why don't you pull the power back up?
Okay. And think about any other questions, and we'll have another little round of questions at the end if somebody wants to. But one thing somebody asked about, so Becky said, remind everybody that all the clubs that are involved in a multi-club project need to be qualified. Each club needs to, if they're going to be participating in the grant. Then another person asked about roughly what is the range of grants that most people will submit. And I'm going to say, just without really going back over it, probably $2,500 to probably $7,500 grants is what people are usually requesting. If you think that you have a large project and you already know about it, we might have to, we'll talk about it. And if we might have to break that up into different parts or whatever, but we'll talk to you about larger projects if you have. So Debbie, you want to continue moving on till so we can finish up for tonight?
David, Leslie has some questions in the chat.
Okay.
She'd like to know how long will we have to complete a project from the date of approval of the grant?
Okay, from the date it's approved, you know, our goal is to sum these up all by the end of May and June. So we've got, I think the timeline says what, May the 31st. That's a good time to finish up your project. And then that way you can be finishing up on all your paperwork. So we can report back to the Rotary Foundation. We'll get all the grants finished. We have to submit a final report to the Rotary Foundation before they release any funds to us for the next year. Does that answer the question?
Yes, thank you.
Okay. Any other questions?
I do want to say, David, that if you finish a project early, you submit it whenever you finish it. I mean, if you finish it in November, don't wait until April or May to submit it. Finish your report. As soon as you finish your project, file your final report, and then you will get reimbursed.
That's exactly right. Any other questions on that? Okay.
David, were there any other things that we wanted to talk about tonight?
Well, and I know that unless there's some slides that we want to just to kind of follow back up on, but if not, I think we'll finish up right here. But if you have questions, be sure and ask us. Where our goal is to help every club get a grant. And if you come up with an idea and it maybe doesn't fit the process a little bit exactly, we'll try to help you form that project and make sure that you can get a fair shot at this grant process. And one of the things I think about is if you're applying for a grant and it's something that is different. Different's okay, but it might be something that we're not used to doing. The Rotary Foundation will give us guidance. We'll submit that application directly to the Rotary Foundation, and they'll say, you know what, you can't do this part of it, but let's think about it and do it another way. So there's always a way to make something work. One of the big questions that I'm always concerned about is Rotarian participation. We want to make sure that we all can have some participation, and we'll help you work on that. If it's a project that's hard to participate in, we can help form some participation to make it something that the Rotary Foundation would be proud of. Anything else?
We'd like to thank you all for being with us. On the screen right now, you can see David's contact, David's contact information and Pat's contact information were on the screen, but they're also on all the forms that you'll be filling out. So you will have them. You can always reach out to me as well. We really appreciate you being with us tonight, and we look forward very much to working with you on developing a great district grant project next year. Thank you again.